It was a time of great economic crisis. What was at that time nationally known as a recession was in Pittsburgh really something approaching a depression.
Layoffs were quite extensive. There was a total reorganization within steel.
There were thousands of businesses that provided services and support and product to the steel industry that also, lost their companies.
Unemployment in this region was approaching 15%.
We were looking at pale imitation of what our economy had been during the salad days of the industrial age.
Many people believe that it was that series of events that once and for all broke the pattern of what had defined Pittsburgh's economy.
And so through 82 and 83, that was an enormous period which the community was going through a tremendous readjustment in that regard.
This region had been dependent on the steel industry and the many jobs that it provided. And we were really at a crossroads. We could have gone the direction of other failing Rust Belt cities, or we could reinvent ourselves.
In the mid-1980s, when every Rust Belt city wanted to become a corporate headquarters and high-tech center, Pittsburgh had certain built-in advantages. It already was a headquarters town. Many of its corporations had a rich history in research and development, and it had two very strong research universities in Pitt and Carnegie Mellon.
All that sponsored research is the potential basis for a product, a process, a company.
Already here in town, people were already at the cutting edge. They were pushing what was happening with computing and technology and robotics and all these things.
Almost in the shadows, there were a number of small technology companies emerging.
Believe it or not, we didn't know each other.
So there was no community where you could sort of go and talk to people with similar problems and maybe talk about where they solved some of their issues or got their people.
And Jay got the idea that there were technology companies in the area and that we should all get together, get to know each other.
So a lot of thought by a handful of us was perhaps to gather together the technology companies we had, empower them, and gain a lot more from that.
The folks who created the Tech Council recognized that something truly profound and important was happening, and they had the vision to create a community around it.
And so there was the beginning of a collaboration amongst those folks who were already here to begin to get together and talk about what they did and what they could do for each other.
The vision of the people who said we have to do something, we can do something, and we know we are going to do something. It's something not only do I feel honored to sort of carry the torch, but to know that against all odds in this whole backdrop of the decimation of what everyone knew here in steel, that they saw right through it. And they didn't see it as risk. They saw it as an imperative.
We tried to work with politicians regardless of party, saying, is it part of your thinking or your vision that technology is part of our future here?
And in that time, the Ben Franklin Partnership was formed, which was a tremendous thing that's brought millions of dollars into this area as investment.
It was a program that was designed to create future-oriented jobs and to make Pennsylvania a player in the advanced technology market.
Once you create the idea that the people want to be entrepreneurs, you get universities and others to have technology, you begin to create people that know how to build those businesses, you need money. And frankly, you need a lot of money.
Back in '83, trying to get somebody to invest in a technology startup, well, it was extremely difficult.
No firms at that time in particular were paying any attention to Carnegie Mellon, University of Pittsburgh, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins, so there's a whole swath of innovation opportunity, and I figured I'd go be the big fish in the very small pond and try to make the pond bigger.
I called a number of venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, and had a wonderful relationship with Tim Draper. I said, Tim, if you're really interested, and forming a relationship with us. I have a meeting tomorrow morning at CMU, and you have to be there. And he took a red eye, came to Pittsburgh, we met with Carnegie Mellon, and the rest is history.
And venture firms were created then. The banks got to understand what we were all about. And then more important, the local and state government got to understand what we needed too.
Mark Nordenberg and Jerry Cohen and Governor Ridge, they were working on this notion of building an electronics and eventually a robotics cluster. They asked me to take a look at it, and I eventually decided that I would be the founding CEO of what was then called the Pittsburgh Digital Greenhouse.
I think the Digital Greenhouse represented a watershed event in the change in economic development in Pennsylvania.
The state was really thinking about creating some initiatives around the biosciences, and the Pittsburgh Life Sciences Greenhouse Initiative was a state initiative.
When we started the Life Science Greenhouse, this region was producing 2, maybe 3 life science startups a year. Now we're producing 20.
It took a while, but there were early innovative technology companies that were formed in the 80s, and they led to much greater things.
The 80s were kind of the building phase, putting the building blocks in place for the council and for the cluster. But the 90s were the go-go years. That's when things really started to take off. The pace started to accelerate, and we started to get some successes.
And in 1990, you had 4 Systems, which was a breakout success. 4 Systems was just a grand slam home run for the region, created hundreds and even thousands ultimately of jobs, and a huge amount of wealth in the region.
In those days, Eric Cooper was giving talks because 4 Systems had been a big success, and those are very inspirational things to hear. You think, well, why not? We can do it too.
You saw companies like Free Markets.
A tremendous innovator. Free Markets invented an industry as well as a company.
And then Respironics was an amazing company, still is.
I jumped in with both feet pretty much as a one-man gang for about 6 months. And by then I had everything that I owned committed, so I couldn't fail. I could not possibly fail. That was not an option. The company grew for like 25 to 30% per year for 25 years.
That's the impact of entrepreneurship. That's the impact of when an entrepreneur starts a business. That's the job creation power of it.
Massive change that's occurred in the last 25, 30 years.
There's a few places in the world right now which are cities of ideas.
The G20 conference sort of comes through as sort of the tipping point.
Maybe most importantly, it helped Pittsburghers believe more that what's going on here is working.
Pittsburgh is pretty unique, and this is why I'm here and Google's here and a whole bunch of technology folks are here. It's one of the only places where people are thinking about the rest of this decade and even the next decade, actually practically trying to map it out.
When you see what other people from the outside think about what we have going here, it has to leave you with great feelings about all of the good things that are going to come as we move even further into this century.
I'm very proud of how much we've changed. What we have today in terms of the way we do technology commercialization is a model for the nation.
So many people come to Pittsburgh and they want to benchmark. They want to find out, how did we do it? What are we doing? What kinds of problems have we solved in our city? But what we're really doing here is we are solving world problems.
Pittsburgh as a community now has worldwide stature.
We have the resources, we have the universities, we have the international platform. but it's small enough that as an individual you can matter. You can get involved and you can actually contribute to the reinvention of Pittsburgh that happens all the time.
Nowadays I say, yeah, I'm in Pittsburgh. It's like a secret place that I almost don't want to tell you about, because it's a great place to live and to work, and you can do amazing things here.
What's going to drive the future of the technology industry in Pittsburgh is great entrepreneurs going after big ideas. That's what we need to do, and that's what we will do, and that's why we're going to have big hits in the future.
There's momentum here.
I would be betting quite heavily on Pittsburgh.
I can't wait for the next 30 years.
Pittsburghers have never been content with just the bare minimum. Sky's the limit.
Even though we've heard through all of this, people are talking about this happened in the 80s, this happened in the 90s, this happened, in 2000. I personally believe the best is yet to come.